you. I would like to introduce our guest speaker now, and I will invite him in a few seconds. Markus Rach is a digital technology lecturer in Switzerland and China, and former head of marketing of various multinational B2Bs. Markus completed his doctoral research at the Maastricht School of Management, researching the impact of marketing technologies on the marketing return on investment. Being passionate about the human to technology interface, Markus currently researches impacts on the brand to marketplace interaction and how these impacts change purchasing decision-making process. As an experimental scientist and marketing consultant, Markus runs various real-life experiments for data gathering and experience purposes. One being over 540,000 followers strong TikTok account that has led to the publication of 4 books and multiple award-winning research papers in 2020 and 2021. Markus is married, has 2 kids, and is a true nerd at heart, having been highly ranked as a gamer. Follow Markus on LinkedIn for more insights and news around digital technology. And if you go to GLOSERV.org, again on the schedule, you'll be able to find all of this. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Markus Rach to GLOSERV. Markus, welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Professor Della Corte, Professor Komanoglu, thank you very much for inviting me for this very kind introduction. And let me just say, for this amazing conference, as you just mentioned, there's plenty of opportunities in the digital space that we currently have. And I think this conference with the thousands of registrations is probably a very good example for this. So yeah,
thank you
for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours. And we'll come back with the questions at the end.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. If I could have my slide, please, then I'll jump right in and start the discussion. So welcome, everybody. As you know, today or this morning, depending where you are, morning in the US, afternoon in Europe, we'll be speaking about TikTok as one of the first topics. So let me jump right in. What do I aim to cover within roughly 45 minutes? So we have time for questions. It's basically the good, the bad, and the ugly of the TikTok platform, just looking at the platform and looking at beyond what could be. You see some of the agenda parts that I aim to go through. Here's some of my background. I've had such a great introduction. I don't think I have to go through this again. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on the GLOSERV website, or you have this link here, this QR code, to find my LinkedIn. Most importantly, I do come in peace. I wish nobody harm, but sometimes I have to speak about the truth in marketing from a practitioner's perspective and where we struggle. So these sections might be R-rated, just as a word of caution. I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but we should have some fun with this very topic. So let me continue. Why do I speak about TikTok and where's my interest coming from? I would say I have 2 profiles, right? One's being the current academic coming from a marketing background, writing books and writing papers, which is sort of like on my off life on the right-hand side of the screen, right? And the other life I have is my TikTok life, which I started on the 14th of January 2020 as an experiment, as a bet, and as a way to show my students that I actually know what I'm talking about. So I created an account, started to post content without really knowing what to do, didn't want to expose myself and make a fool out of myself. And at some point, that account started growing. And now I got to do something with it. And this is what we talk about today, hopefully in an interesting fashion. So for the continuation of the presentation, I will dive a bit into the marketing world. And as I've been introduced with a practitioner's background to marketing, I have to ask the question, what is the task of a marketer in 2021? It was a task before, but what is the task of a marketer in 2021? From my interpretation and the way I look at it, particularly also for this presentation, it's to understand and to manage the interaction of a brand with the market, and therefore constantly question and research the impacting factors upon this interaction. So let me just quickly shift my screen. Everything perfect. All right. So this is what we want to get into. Therefore, a marketer should have at some point a warning bell when a platform reaches 1 billion users. And of course, this is what we talk about today. So let's get into the background of what TikTok is, just to make sure we're all on the same page. As you all know, TikTok belongs to a company called ByteDance, right? ByteDance is a Chinese organization, a Chinese tech player, which I think before TikTok has been largely unknown in the Western parts of the world. It's a huge organization with over 60,000 people working for it. And again, at the very core of this organization is AI and technology. This will be very important when we come back to what I believe will be the future of TikTok, the future of short video, and maybe the question why ByteDance has an interest in developing such a platform and such an application. I have a theory. If that holds true or not, we'll see. But that might be very interesting to discuss in the comments, or have 1 or 2 questions leading to it. So looking at the history of TikTok, to give a little introduction and make sure everybody knows what it is. Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, has been launched in 2016, so quite a while ago. The app is primarily available in China, and of course with that it has the Chinese moderation of content. As you know, there are some regulations in China that don't apply to the Western world and vice versa. In 2017, ByteDance pushed the Douyin application to the Western world. That was the actual launch of TikTok. But the app was largely unknown, actually, until, I'd say, mid-2019, maybe even beginning of 2020, to the major part of the social media sphere, because it has been growing sort of like in the background. It bought an application called, or a platform called Musical.ly in the US. There were some rumors around this and some regulation issues, but nothing that really caught the public eye. With the hit of the global pandemic that fortunately or unfortunately enabled this really great event, we had TikTok become sort of like an absorbent of the available spare time suddenly everybody had. Because what happened? We were in lockdown, we were at home, or depending, the country we were in, you had way more time to spend online. So people started flocking, looking for new things, and TikTok became incredible traction, right? And the app became very popular, particularly among very young users. And as such, the app grew tremendously over to 2020, basically every quarter, being pretty much the dominating app of the year 2020 in terms of downloads, in terms of user growth, pretty much every statistic you would want to pull and look at. In the time frame, right, there hasn't been just growth to 1 billion global users, monthly active users, by the way. There have also been a lot of developments around TikTok that maybe you've seen or heard in the news, or just read somewhere, or maybe not. And I would categorize them in political moves and economic moves the platform has shown. Let me just go through a few that I think are important to mention and show sort of like the agility of this very platform and player in the global market. The first one is the ban in India. TikTok has been banned twice in India. The first ban was revoked. Why? Because TikTok played into the regulations that the Indian government asked for, and additionally developed an initiative, or came out with an initiative, Learning on TikTok, or EduTalk at that time, that again played very much into the cards of the Indian government, right? To foster education, to drive an initiative the Indian government had to digitalize the environment and many, many jobs. So TikTok did a good thing for its own image, a good thing for the government, and thus reestablish itself. And that in almost like no time. This is very, very agile. TikTok has also been banned in India. You've probably, and you couldn't escape the rumors about a potential ban in the US, and how TikTok acted or reacted upon this, what TikTok has done. We're not going to go into details, and of course, not into politics. TikTok has had various CEOs, and of course appointed a US CEO, an ex-Disney manager for a period of time, then shifted to female, now a Singaporean. So it shows again the agility of the platform, right? And another thing that TikTok did in 2020, it opened transparency centers. Why did it do that? Right? Not just a transparency report about what the platform does and how it does it, also a transparency center inviting government officials to come and have a look at the operations of the platform. And this was basically to counteract much of the rumors, much of the political discussion that particularly started in the US at this very time frame. So very interesting what happened, I believe, and a very, very agile business manner of the platform. At the same time, we've seen a couple of economic moves, or commercial moves, if you want, from the platform. One was the Learning with TikTok initiative that came out of this EduTalk creation in India. And the other one was, of course, the creation of the Ad and Business Center to commercialize, monetize the platform, right? Which is currently ongoing and started in the mid of 2020. So I think that provides you sort of like an overview of what the platform did and how the platform developed. And with that, I think it shouldn't be any surprise that, of course, TikTok has been the fastest growing social media app or platform in recent years. And particularly if we look at which platform took how long in a time duration to reach 1 billion users. Of course, here we would have, and I assume we have many academics here, we would have to have a word of caution and say, hey, we can't compare the Facebook launch, the first couple of years of Facebook, to TikTok today, because even if you take the application of Moore's law into the dissemination of application and technology to the consumer, our behavior, our adoption behavior from a consumer perspective has changed, of course, tremendously over the last couple of years, right? You all know that Pokemon Go took 19 days to get to 50 million users. It took the airline industry 6 to 8 years to do the same. This is not comparable, though, because we'll talk about vastly different time frames. But anyhow, TikTok remains the most agile platform, I'd say, and the most fastest growing platform these days on planet Earth. So that's quite interesting, I think, to take this a bit further and therefore look into, at least rudimentarily, the functionality of the platform. I would assume most of you have seen TikTok, have downloaded the app. So you know if you open the app, it's very, very intuitive to use. You have the majority of the screen being taken up by short video. It's a short video application. The limit of the video length, excluding live sessions, is 60 seconds. The average video centers around 15 seconds, 13 to 15. Why? Because attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. It's really hard to get users to consume more content. In the middle of the screen, if you look over here, you have that cross. If you tap on that one, you start recording a TikTok. This is the one you currently watch. Here's some rudimentary information. We don't need this for this talk. If you have the app, play around with it, super easy. What we do need, however, and we get back to, is this over here, the For You page. It's your individualized feed that will ask, or that makes TikTok so incredibly addictive. And this is what we get to now in a section. So what makes TikTok so incredibly different, with 2 F's, of course, right? For this, we need to look, I think, a bit into the depth of what social media have done, because they've had 10, 15 years of time of time advantage or market advantage to TikTok. So what have they done? Most social platforms, as you know, do rely on what we call a social graph. So they look at you, they look at your friendship circle or your social connections, what they like, what they do, how you communicate, and therefore determine possible or potential content that you would be served that would be part of your interest. And one of the issues that this social graph or this network idea brings with it is, of course, that we have something that we call a filter bubble, right? This could lead to, if you start clicking on cat content on Facebook, then suddenly you meet only people who have an interest in cats and cat business and everything to do with cats. And this might be great for a certain period of time, but it might become an issue after some time because you just don't have an interest in cats anymore. Or you want to do something else. Or maybe what your friends do isn't particularly relevant to you, right? And of course, at the same time, as soon as a platform starts to monetize, the focus shifts usually very much from the user to the monetization of the platform, which means one thing and one thing only, advertising, of course. So with this, let's look at what TikTok does differently. And here you see we have this For You feed again, right, that I mentioned. So let's assume you download the app and you haven't done anything on the app so far. So it's a plain app. You haven't even logged in. How would TikTok know what you're interested in, right? TikTok's not going to ask you many questions. TikTok's not going to ask you about your friends or your network. Well, I have introduced this recently, but let's just leave this away. So TikTok will serve you content, right? Let's just assume TikTok will serve you a couple of clips, each clip relating, you see this here in the color code, to a different content category, right? And you start watching these clips and you start scrolling and maybe you like one, maybe you comment, for which of course you need an account, and so on and so forth. Depending on your behavior, TikTok will then of course realize and understand, or not TikTok, but the algorithm, what content you prefer, and maybe even what content in which context you prefer, right? So if you assume before that we watched video 2 or video 3, you see on the color code, the content will become slightly more similar. It'll go more into a sort of like sporty, entertaining direction, right? But how does TikTok then avoid that fallacy of the filter bubble, right? How does TikTok avoid becoming like every other social media player that we currently have? And it's again that very, very focus on the user, that user centricity, that putting the user in the center, in the focus of the application, and trying to decode and understand really the behavior of a single user and context. So it's nothing else but, if you put this in layman's terms, a matchmaking platform of content on the one hand and user behavior on the other hand. So therefore, you would avoid almost instinctively that filter bubble issue. Behind all of this would be a neural network. So this is fairly complex. I wouldn't want to say that I've decoded it because I haven't, but I spoke to some machine learning experts and had really great conversations into the most likely theory that would explain how the TikTok algorithm works. But of course, only TikTok will hold this very secret. So when we talk about a matchmaking platform of content and users, we do need a lot of content, right? And of course, if you look at TikTok, many people will bring up the dancing teens and the fun and the jokes and the entertainment side. But there's actually a plenty of a content universe to be found on the application. This is research from some colleagues that have identified 28 to 29 different content categories. You see sort of like the frequency of content appearance and the gender ratio of content creation. I tried to put an engagement rating to it to show how much users engage with certain pieces of content. And this is very interesting because even if I take up some of the questions that I got from Professor Kobanoglu before the presentation, if you look, for example, at nutrition food, which would be part of hospitality, there's a great niche that's there to grow, right? There's an opportunity to do something. What about education? Well, interesting, right? Where would education fall? Tutorials, maybe partly sports, maybe partially architecture, maybe partially some others, or a new category to emerge. So I think there's a lot that can be done in TikTok to bring the platform further and to develop the platform from a business perspective or an opportunity perspective. But we'll get back to this when we do the questions. So to sum this very much up from a functionality perspective, I could talk for hours on this, but we have to keep it short. TikTok, in my opinion, is not in the business of entertainment, but in the business to decode the human behavior contextually, right? And this in a very addictive fashion. If you have the app, you know what I mean with addiction. You click on it and you say, oh, I'm just going to watch 1 or 2 TikToks. 2 or 3 hours later, you're still scrolling. And you can't really explain why. This is the behavioral focus on you and you only, and not the social graph around you. So let's look into some use cases and some best practice applications. What is happening on and or around TikTok? And now we're getting a bit more into the meat, into the interesting parts that we can then also discuss and probably take even further. So what does TikTok provide? What does TikTok have from a business perspective? Obviously, TikTok, and I said this before, in mid-2020, TikTok introduced the business center or the advertising center, and therefore a wealth of advertising opportunities. Some of them I would classify as traditional advertising, like the top view brand takeover or in-feed ads, which is more or less just, within the feed of your TikTok, a screen that looks like everything else on the application, apart from the brand takeover, and shows you sponsored content if you want, right? The trick to this, of course, will be to make this content part of the flow of the application. And I'll argue that a lot of businesses do struggle very heavily by adopting a native content perspective and shifting away from this, let's just push advertising to the user. But we'll get back to this. Two things that are a bit particular or a bit special for TikTok or to TikTok are the branded hashtag challenges and the branded effects that we see here on the right-hand side of the screen over here. These are very interesting because it engages the user as part of the advertising scheme, right? It asks the user to take part, to have an interest, to be involved if you want. And just let's look here at one that I prefer very much, one of my favorites. This is a hashtag challenge that has been created in, I think, March or April of 2020, so at the very start of the pandemic. And if you look at this hashtag challenge, it's called the Dettol Hand Wash Challenge by Ricker Beck, I believe, is the company behind Dettol. So it's a hygiene product that, of course, got tremendous traction once the pandemic hit, of course, right? As you can imagine, there's no rocket science behind that. But what is so incredible about this very campaign, right? This is a campaign by one company, campaign duration, I believe it's been 2 times 2 weeks, right? If I'm not wrong. And you probably spotted it. It has 125, we could leave the digits away, but 0.3 billion views. I can't recall any campaign on planet Earth that had 125 billion views. This is pretty much unheard of. This is absolutely crazy. But of course, this leads also to 1 or 2 questions. For example, what is a view? How can a campaign on TikTok have 125.3 billion views? How many people do we have on planet Earth, right? How many social media users do we have on the planet? And how can it be that we then have a campaign with 125 billion views? So the only answer to this would be that we must have had some of the, at this time, probably 500 million users on the platform watch this hashtag challenge multiple times. And of course, the question would be, what is a view, right? Is a view watching the entire clip, or is a view starting the watch time, maybe finishing, maybe not? TikTok every now and then addresses this topic, but I'll just leave it up to you to keep this in mind, that we see insane numbers, but we of course have to question the value behind these numbers for the organization. Nevertheless, though, if you're a marketer and you bring home 125 billion views of a campaign, you're probably the most famous marketer in the organization for quite a while. What else TikTok brought to the market, apart from the ad perspective that I've just mentioned, is the creator marketplace. And as you know, we're very much into an era of influencer marketing. You've probably heard about the Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul boxing match that's going to happen, and it's going to bring in insane amounts of money. And this would have never happened if Logan Paul wouldn't have been a person with a wide social media reach, therefore being able to monetize this reach in a commercial perspective. And TikTok, of course, realized this as one of the earliest first platforms, in my opinion, on the planet, to say, hey, like every other platform, we do have influencers. So people gaining a large amount of following and being able to influence that following. Usually what platforms do, they have these influencers, but they really don't engage with them directly that much. With the TikTok Creator Marketplace, TikTok introduced a tool that I believe is very interesting because it provides a way for brands to find relevant influencers on the TikTok platform through TikTok, right? What's currently not part of the scheme is the pricing and the contractual work. I think this will be part of the future, and this will close sort of like the control loop for the platform, which we get back to when we talk about some ethical considerations, which I believe is going to be very, very interesting, right? When we speak about the control a platform might get. But this is just for you, so you see it's very easy going through the creator marketplace to find a potential influencer that you could work with and that could help you to push your brand even further. With that, of course, TikTok shows us a lot of metrics being researched, in that case, together with Content Media, and showing how well accepted, let's just put it, the platform content is to the TikTok users. What I didn't say on the very beginning is that, of course, many TikTok users are rather on the young side, so the platform demographics, as probably everybody knows, is skewed to the younger age groups, and that means we have a very advertising illiterate audience on the platform. So the Gen Z and the majority of users, 60 to 80% being below 35 years of age, are very advertising literate. Therefore, every now and then it's easier to push certain commercial messages to these audiences, and therefore increase both brand awareness and or favorability, as we can see here in this slide. Taking this further, what are some best practice examples? And that would be many best practice examples we could look at. But here are some of my personal favorites. Everybody would have different ones. I try to have examples from different industries and sectors that we can look at and see there's a wealth of applications, and not just in B2C as we probably would expect. So here's one of my absolute favorite examples from an industrial application. It's a German company called GLOSERV. I never heard of them before in my life on TikTok. And I came across this company with here a guy on the right-hand side dancing with a tie, right? He's the boss of that very team. And here is his two young colleagues. The organization portraying itself from a very humanized brand perspective as an industrial company selling industrial products. So in the B2B space, they will never, ever, or most likely not, sell a product through TikTok, but they humanize the brand. And this is utterly important in an age that was introduced before of decentralization, of distance communication, right? Where the most important aspect of B2B, the personal relationship, becomes harder because we have to use Zoom and Teams and whatever other platform. Now we suddenly can see the fun side behind emails, the fun side behind that phone call, right? That humanizes that very brand. So quite interesting and very successful with what they do without the help of an outside agency. And here's my favorite proof of this. So they've done a clip, and I apologize for this being in German, but it's the fault of the users in that case. So they've done a clip and showed how great their boss was, the boss of that PR team. And we had many young users reply, say, where could I apply? I want to work in an organization like this. I think that's probably the best PR you can have as an organization if users start to ask how they could manage to work for you. I think that's absolutely unbeatable. What else do we have? My next favorite best practice case is from the Volksbank Mittelhessen. It's a bank in Germany, and I have to take a picture for them, I promised it. That is sort of like a mid-sized bank, I believe, from a global perspective, but they've started to become active on TikTok as well. So what have they done? Apart from amassing almost 40,000 followers on TikTok organically, they have counteracted this notion of banks being conservative and boring. How? Well, again, they have showed the behind the scenes. Hey, this is where we work, and this is what we do, right? This is how we behave. We actually also have fun at the workplace. They start to do educational content. What is an interest rate? How do I get a loan? How do I buy stocks? And what is Bitcoin, right? And again, they've used an element of human emotion to convey how it is to work for the bank, how they have fun and whatnot. And very similar to the GLOSERV case, they have used to young employees to speak the language of the younger generation and transfer content from the bank to that generation. And again, I believe very successfully so. And here another example that I absolutely love. The three gentlemen here on the left call themselves the sugar daddies. And I think they do so in a good way and not by the stereotype you would probably assume, they came out with a product called Cookie Bros, which is cookie dough to eat. I think there's plenty of variation in the US, but in Europe, that's sort of like a novel product, at least for the most part. So they introduced this very product, Cookie Bros, and with any product that goes into the food sector and retail food, you have an issue of distribution. You need a wide distribution network to make sure consumers get your product. So they took it to TikTok initially and started to organically create content. That content was perceived by a very young target group that said, hey, where can we get this cookie dough? So they said to them, well, go to your local supermarket and ask for Cookie Bros. So these young users started to flock into these supermarkets and said, we want to have Cookie Bros, right? And you can imagine the person at register was completely confused that I don't know what you want. We don't have it. What can I do for you, right? And that happened multiple times a day. So that person called the store manager. The store manager called Cookie Bros and said, I want to have your product in the store. And they said, well, we're sorry. If we supply every store by ourselves, we're only 3 people. We will literally explode by the complexity. We need to speak to central purchasing. So within a couple of months from doing this on TikTok, they have exploded and become basically nationwide available, in that case in Germany, within no time, basically, right? And have, I believe, around 200,000 followers on TikTok. Check the latest numbers, but a very hit brand. An example from the US would be Nerdy Nuts, very, very similar to what we just heard about from Cookie Bros. So a, what do you call it? A spread, a peanut butter type spread called Nerdy Nuts, so a bit more fancier than the average peanut butter. And they again took it to TikTok. You see sort of like the development of their turnover from $8,000 a month to over 500,000 to $500,000 with the push they have gained through the TikTok application. So absolutely amazing, absolutely tremendous what the platform can do in terms of scaling, in terms of pushing for growth and whatnot. So this is completely crazy. Right, so let's go to the next one. My next best practice example would be the Washington Post, right? So a newspaper, who would have thought? A newspaper on TikTok. What does a newspaper do on the TikTok application? This is, I think, a very interesting question that we need to ask ourselves. Washington Post took it to TikTok and started to create content that is relevant to a younger user group. That content got so much traction that the Washington Post is very close to breaching the 1 million follower mark on TikTok, which, if you compare it to one of their fiercest competitors, New York Times, with 452, and zero content raises a very important question. If you look here on the right-hand side, I know this is a bit far-fetched, but every now and then we need to connect the dots, right? If you look here on the right-hand side, number of subscribers, right? The newspaper business has also been transformed from a paper business into a digital subscription business. Whilst the New York Times is leading, the Washington Post is in second place, right? Maybe this isn't a bad strategy to say we get in contact with the newer generations of users, right? Get them associated and positively attributed to our brand, and thus be able to convert them, I would assume that be part of the strategy, into paid subscribers later on in the life cycle, right? Suddenly we see a commercial interest coming out of entertaining content that, as such, I think is very interesting for the brand. And that leads us to a claim that TikTok puts out in the market. Don't make ads, make TikToks. It's not me saying that, that's TikTok saying that. But I have this critique on that very claim that neither TikTok enforces it nor brands do get it. Because if you look at what brands mostly do on TikTok, many brands, I'm not saying all of the brands, but most of the brands, particularly when they move into the paid side of the TikTok application, they start to create paid products, as I showed before, influencer campaigns, but they seem to forget that don't make ads, make TikTok world, but they move into this intrusive advertising mode they have been used to, and they know for centuries, let's just put it that way, right? Forever. This is what we've done in marketing to a large part. Push advertising in the face of the consumer, retarget the consumer. Let's just hope it sticks. My research has shown, by the way, my tutorial research, that this isn't necessarily the case. It doesn't help the marketing ROI to increase, right, if you behave that way. We need to gain consumer insight, which TikTok in theory will provide. So here my example is Mercedes-Benz, the global automotive, everybody knows it. Having done the introduction of the C-Class here in these top 3 videos with an influencer on TikTok. It's a very known influencer, and he has one of the top 10 on the platform, and does sort of like this magic, entertaining trick type stuff. Really interesting, super heavy to create content and whatnot. I would say the campaign was a flop. Why? Well, look at the numbers, right? Even if you're nice and sum up these 3 videos and we'll just throw a little on top and say it's been 150,000 views, that's absolutely nothing on the platform. I've done a video on Mercedes at the same time frame, not a promotional campaign, but a whingy one, and I had, I think, 250,000. And that was just me having no budget and 5 minutes time to do it. And Mercedes, having had an insane budget, buying TikTok ads and having an influencer, didn't achieve these numbers. Why? Because it was intrusive advertising, nothing else. The consumer understands what intrusive advertising is and starts to swipe up, right? And doesn't consume it. To contrast, there was a guy just, cleaning windows, and somebody asked him to put the Mercedes logo or sort of like sketch the Mercedes logo into the window foam. He did it. Same time as the launch, had roughly 7 million views, right? Don't make ads, make TikToks. And the same, of course, applies to many influencer campaigns, as I just mentioned before, which would, by the way, raise a question that I think is interesting from an academic, scientific point of view. What has influencer marketing become? Much of the literature discusses that relationship orientation of the influencer with the followership. But if I look at the developments on TikTok, and we could use Instagram in the same way, by the way, I'm not bashing the platform, but we're talking today about TikTok, so I'm focusing on. If you look at TikTok, and we see here, for example, on the right-hand side, Shirley D'Amelio, the most followed person with 140 million followers on the platform, the first one to reach 100 million. She does a lot of transactional-oriented content. Here's a credit card, go and buy it. Here's a Dunkin' Donuts coffee, go and buy it. That has nothing to do with relationship-oriented content. If I look at her other content, it's not relationship-oriented either. It's her dancing, right? So I think this would raise a very important question of how that relationship influence the followers formed. How has this changed, particularly with the new generation, Gen Z, and probably even Gen Alpha coming to the game? And what will this mean going forward for both influencers and brands, and of course parents and their offspring? Even worse, I believe, is if you look at the most valuable brand in the world, Apple, right? Apple's also on TikTok, as many other brands. I couldn't name them all. And Apple hasn't posted any content on the app until mid-March this year. So they ruined my entire presentation because I want to say Apple hasn't done anything. So now they have posted content. The content they have posted is pure advertising, right? It's no other content, just advertising. The question, of course, is if you look at, oops, sorry, I just clicked on the wrong button. If you look at here, the following of Apple, having a 0 following, so the account Apple follows nobody. Is this per se still social media? Are we being social? Are brands being social, following nobody? Showing it's nothing else but a one-to-many channel, like TV, like radio, like anything else we've done in advertising? Big question mark, right? That we should bring up here and say, that's definitely an advertising alert. How long can this last? Because the format of short video is only a format. At the end of the day, it's got to be applicable, interesting, and contextually relevant to the user to stay alive. The last one I show you here, or the last example, is a hashtag challenge that an Italian company, Moncler, brought up. It's a fashion brand, fairly expensive. I would say it's a luxury fashion brand. And they've done influencer campaigns with basically every influencer that couldn't run away. The campaign has reached 7.4 billion views. Probably been expensive using all of these influencers and the hashtag challenge. So I would assume it's been between $500,000 and $1 million, probably in that scenario, in that total campaign budget. The question from my point of view would be, if the majority of users are below 34 years of age, And out of this, the majority is below 24 years of age. Do they have the disposable income to actually buy this product? Does this campaign make a lot of sense? Yes, it has 7.4 billion views, but what's the point, right? What's the point from a return perspective for this very brand? Can it be leveraged from a brand perspective? Again, very big question mark. So to sum up these use cases and just make sure we get further, we have seen TikTok, again, it's a short video application. So it's a new format that brands have to learn. Some brands have already embraced that format. They have embraced to communicate a message in 15 to 60 seconds, right? And focus only on what's relevant within that message. And let me tell you from my experience, it's hard to do a video, but it's super hard to do a 15-second video, to communicate a message that is interesting to somebody else within 15 seconds. It's probably the hardest that I've done. So brands do have to learn this very skill to be able to do that. And I encourage every brand to start learning this, because the format of short video is currently a trending format, of course. The platform is very Gen Z relevant, or younger target group relevant. But as we have seen, the platform is maturing. More groups will come, or more demographics will come to the platform. So this will change, of course, over time. But the question remains, what does make sense on a platform and what doesn't, right? If I want to sell a luxury item and I do a broad advertising with influencers catering to a very young generation, does this make sense from an ROI perspective? Leaving away ethics, leaving away anything else? I don't think so, right? What will the platform do in the future? What should be monitored? We get to this now. E-com integration. If you look at Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, we already see there's a steep integration of e-commerce in different ways, and partially it's coming over to TikTok, but very slowly. I think the future will be a much deeper e-commerce integration on the platform. So TikTok will transform into a direct place of selling, I believe, right? We also need to monitor, of course, the cultural fit and the resource requirements from a brand perspective. So before a brand jumps into TikTok, I think the brand needs to establish its brand boundaries. Where do I feel comfortable as a brand, and where do I start to feel iffy? Where is it too much? Can I talk about sex, religion, politics? Probably not. Let's take this off the table. What's left? Do I feel comfortable? Can I be funny? If not, it's going to be hard at some point, right? What's left? So find the niche that makes sense, that is relevant to the generations that you find on the platform. And of course, ask yourselves, are these the generations and demographics you want to reach? Yes or no? And we've seen there's many applications. Brand humanization, employer branding, product explanation. There's so much that can be done, but the relevancy, of course, has to be there. The 2 points here on the bottom, of course, platform dependency and the meaningfulness of the impact that we want to create. Do we just run after hype as a marketer? We shouldn't be doing that, right? We should be analyzing and then putting our resources to the best use. And do we become dependent on a platform? And I say this dependency very much happens in other platforms. The moment a business starts to rely on advertising to generate revenues, a business becomes dependent on the very platform that generates the most revenue for it. And as we've seen over the last, I think in the last 2 weeks, Facebook came out with the quarterly results. Revenue gone up. Why? Because Facebook just increased prices. If you're dependent on Facebook, as an example, as your revenue stream through advertising, you're dependent upon the pricing of Facebook within the level of margins you can generate. So it's a very dangerous game. But let's move into what I believe are the future directions and the ethical dilemma. So here's the spice really of my presentation that hopefully you guys find interesting. Yeah, I just said this, so the future developments and ethical dilemma. For this, we have to get a tiny bit freaky, but don't worry, I'm not taking it too far. However, I did ask the very question of why does ByteDance, an organization being 60,000 employees strong and at its core being this AI, machine learning, super high-tech business, why do they have an interest in dancing teens? Here on the left-hand side, again, Charlie D'Amelio, the most followed person on TikTok, and the second most followed person on TikTok, Addison Rae, both having together almost 200 million followers. Does ByteDance have an interest in this? I have my very doubts. Why? Well, of course, we could sell advertising, right? We could generate revenue through new advertising models and break away from Facebook and make their life hard. But let's look at the evolution of advertising over time. We have done this in TV, right? When we start to take away from newspapers and print. We have done this in other forms before. And now it's the time of e-com search and whatnot, right? We see already flattening of search. We see a steep increase in e-com and social. Will this last forever? I have my very doubts, because if you think beyond, we can tell, or we know actually, that advertising are very ineffective as market makers, right? Ads do have a glass ceiling. I mean, this chart kind of like shows it, right? One level, one form goes down, the other one goes up, and sort of substitutes. But at budgets, they're not infinite. If ads come to the marketplace, ads are nothing but commodities. If we look at, in that case, the digital sphere as a utility between a brand and consumer, it's the roadmap to get to a consumer. So the product to get to the consumer becomes the commodity at some point. Because all advertising vehicles we see in most platforms are the same, right? You can specify to whom you want to be talking. You can specify what they should be doing. You have different forms of formats you can push to them, and that's basically it. So it becomes a commodity. It's not sexy as such. And we know there's decreasing ad effectiveness over time. So the influencer hype we currently see, the TikTok hype we currently see, at some point it's going to stagnate, and at some point stagnation is going to go downwards, right? It's going to happen because consumers will look very much beyond. And I believe that new technology will disrupt advertising. And this new technology will be immersive technologies like blended reality. Just imagine you have glasses on and you have digital content being put over the real world. And now you walk through a supermarket and suddenly Coke ad would pop up and you see nothing anymore. That wouldn't work, right? So disruptive advertising would have to change. It wouldn't work anymore, most likely. And this leads us to algorithmic commerce as a potential future that TikTok or ByteDance could be aiming at. And my theory is very much supported, or let's just back myself up to Scott Galloway, an NYU Stern professor who had the very same epiphany, but I think he has way more weight than I have, saying the very same thing. So let's use a TikTok algorithm that is able to decode human behavior and understand our black box of what we do without asking us, understanding us, right? What you see on your TikTok screen is pretty much your soul, your interest. This is what you do. Nobody else does it. It's you. It's your clicking. It's your liking. It's your engagement. Engagement and rich engagement will be two different topics we could get into maybe in the questions. What has TikTok recently done? Well, they partnered with Oracle and Walmart. Now, Oracle's great. They don't need them, I believe. But Walmart's interesting. Why? Because Walmart holds retail. It's one of the biggest retailers on the planet. So suddenly, TikTok has, at least in some countries, products and logistics. And now add to products and logistics a behavioral algorithm that looks into the black box of the market and says, oh, I know what Markus likes. I know how Markus behaves in a certain context. Let's give Markus what he wants, what he likes in that very context, and that be that zero-click behavior. The way that could potentially work, just imagine, you have a box in front of your home. You open your door and there's a box. You open the box and it's like, wow, I have a Darth Vader toy. I've always wanted to have that. Now it's at home. Do I send it back? No, I already have it. Let's keep it, right? This would be more or less how algorithmic commerce works. If the algorithm is smart enough to figure out what you keep versus what you would send back, and if that difference would be higher than the opportunity cost of logistics, it would actually be a workable business model. And now I think this is interesting. It could mean that you could take some brands or some items out of the marketplace. You could basically exclude them from the marketplace if you wanted to. What does support my theory? ByteDance, so the parent company of TikTok, came out with a product 1 week ago, which is called Byte Plus. And this is selling artificial intelligence or platform intelligence to industries, right? Where do they have this platform intelligence from? Well, one of the partners, their product is being applied is TikTok. So they generate, like Amazon Web Services, a new service or business generation or business model through their learnings of the platform. And again, in my opinion, they decode human behavior. What else could be the future? We spoke about influencers, and I'm slowly coming to the end. Don't worry, only a few more slides, and then we have it. So we're talking about influencers. Influencers have, however, a big fallacy, right? There's one influencer, like a Charlie D'Amelio with 140 million users or followers, speaks to all 140 million at the same time with the same message. That isn't effective. There's a lot of lost communication, a lot of lost interest, a lot of mismatch of messaging, right? What would be interesting would be, in that case, a Metahuman influencer. This is a copy of Epic's Metahuman creator. Each and every one of you, by the way, can go to metahuman.unrealengine.com, get a free account, cost no money, and play around and create your Metahuman creator. Let me show you a couple of seconds of how that would look like if you created a Metahuman.
I could be one of many.
主人公にだってなれる。
Je pourrais être architecte.
Ou guide.
Yeah, I'll stop it here for the sake of time. These are CGI characters. I would think if you see them in 8K rendered on my screen, they look so incredibly real, you wouldn't know the difference. And now imagine in a world, what I said before, we have here in the middle your influencer that broadcasts a message to all of their following, right? The same message all the time. And we said the problem that this message doesn't resonate with everybody because contextually, these two gentlemen are currently working in a bad time, right? They have no interest, they don't want to hear it. She's receptive, she's on vacation, and he's receptive because he's currently gaming, so he's listening to it. But now imagine we have this metahuman with the TikTok algorithm. So we have the decoding of behavior and understanding of the black box. And now we have a influencer that's actually a CGI model and that contextually adapts both behavior, message, content, and visual to each follower in a contextually real-time manner. And suddenly we're in a completely different discussion. Now that message coming from one being, although a CGI character, is tailorized to each of the followers, and it becomes relevant. Wouldn't that be interesting, right? And I think with the way TikTok moves forward, that could be one of the ways we could look at it. And now the last part, and then we're on the ethical dilemmas, and I think they will be also very interesting. The paper I submitted to this absolutely stunning conference is about plastic surgery on the platform. So I for some reason, I came around plastic surgeons and I thought, why are so many plastic surgeons on the TikTok platform? Because it'd be a good question, right? I mean, they're adults, they're medical professionals, and they do stuff on TikTok. Well, now it's interesting because they have a very interesting user group to get to. They can't do advertising for plastic surgery-related content, but they can use user-generated content and own content to get very advertising literate users to be interested in the products and services. And that, by the way, led to the youngest patients in the US being 14 to receive plastic surgery. All they need is a signature from the parents, and you can go to Simon Plastic or any other doctor that's on the app or off the app and get fixed whatever you want to have. And the way, by the way, that works is user-generated content lowers self-perception of users, and advertising content of plastic surgeons increases the legitimacy of receiving plastic surgery. So, and that leads us to that thing, and then I'm pretty much done. Here's the scenario. We have platforms on the left-hand side. We have the clueless user on the right-hand side. We have the creator. Somebody needs to create content, right, to keep the user busy, to keep the user on the platform. Why do I want to keep the user on the platform? Well, the longer the user is on the platform, the more we can serve advertising, right? So we monetize the user. Now, here's the issue. Brands could work with the creator directly and send content to the user. What does the platform have from this? No money, no fun, right? So what do brands do? They decrease the organic reach of brands, right? So instead of you having, if you have, as a brand, have 100 million followers, instead of you being able to broadcast a message to 100 million people, your message will be reduced to an absolute minimum, and you have to actually pay to reach your followers. Interesting. At the same time, what if a creator works with a brand but not over your platform? You decrease the reach of that creator. That happened to me many times, by the way. And what happens when the user doesn't pay attention? you use persuasive technology and design to lure the user back in. You use the algorithm to decode the user's behavior and make it addictive. And if you look now at this very scenario, we could actually say that TikTok, as one of the first platforms on the universe, in my opinion, has created an ecosystem in which it can control every component needed to optimize its own profit. Please note, I'm not blaming TikTok for this. I think it's genius. If it's ethically correct, it's a completely different question, because it could lead in theory to TikTok being able, we won't have time to go into this example, it's voice technology, but it would enable to TikTok, like voice technology that we find today, to exclude players from the marketplace. Kind of like the lawsuit that Apple's currently going through with Facebook and the iOS 14.5, right? So now coming to the end, I think there's much room for research on the platform, right? Targeted at businesses. Where's the real use of TikTok or other platforms coming up of short video content? But also for regulators. How can we protect consumers? How can we avoid a platform becoming a utility like Facebook has already done, right? What does it mean to have privacy and content? How does it need to be regulated? And of course, for parents and consumers, how can we increase advertising literacy? Is it ethical that our daughters or sons, doesn't really matter, with 14 want to have a new nose or something else altered on the body? Is it healthy for a generation, for society? I don't know. But anyhow, I cut it short now. I'm a bit over time, I think. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it was entertaining and interesting. And now we'd be here if you have time for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Markus. It was wonderful. I have a lot of questions. So I would like to ask you, please, I'm going to show them to you and read them quickly. And if you can please give short answers, so because we have many of them, let's start with this one. Do you believe TikTok presents opportunities for small businesses that do not have big budgets? If yes, what would be the best approach? Hire a freelancer?
Very good question. Yes, the example of Nerdy Nuts, the example of the bank I provided, and the example of Cookie Bros. They're also, I mean, Cookie Bros is the definition of a small business, but Nerdy Nuts, 2 people or 3 people, right? It can't be much smaller. Their budget was literally 0, so they've done no advertising, but organic content. What I would suggest you to do, create an account on TikTok, a business account with your business name, let this alone for the time being, and create an account to experiment. Try to find out what works and what doesn't. And if you get a feel for the platform, just do it. I always say, if a 13-year-old can use the platform, why can't an adult? There's no reason why.
Exactly. Okay, here you go. Here's the other question. If I have an insurance business, as an example, how do I determine the content for my TikTok campaign? Or do I have to simply pay TikTok ads so that I have exposure? How to reach the right audience?
Very good question. There's a guy in Germany who does taxation-related content. I mean, doing your yearly taxes is probably the most boring thing any of us faces, right? I mean, personally, I haven't met anybody who said, I love taxes. And he does tax-related content on TikTok, and it works. He makes it interesting. Take the subject you have. It doesn't matter if it's insurance or tax-related or high finance. Break it down in sections. Say, what are things people struggle with? Think about the audience first. What is it that my audience struggles with or finds interesting? And just explain it. You can do informative, expansive content. Use a bit of your personality to make it interesting. I wouldn't start with ads. Look at Apple. They just throw money at the problem, but they have the free cash flow to do it. Right? I wouldn't do it. I would grow organically while I can, like Washington Post.
Wonderful. Here's the next question. How do you suggest engaging older generations on the TikTok platform? I want to add to this question. Do you actually need to engage or target older generations in TikTok?
Well, first of all, the question would be, is that older generation on TikTok? Yes or no? If it's a no, I think the question would be redundant. If you want to reach older generations, there are platforms like Facebook where we old people are, right? So go and find us there. That's much, much easier. Of course, Facebook has the organic reach already capped. So getting to that older audience will cost you money unless you find a super creative way. On TikTok, if that older audience comes, just create content that's interesting, because you have to remember, if I go on TikTok or you go, content fights for our attention. So you have to be interesting to get into that behavioral attention span of the audience, by the way.
Wonderful. Okay, here's the next one. For how long do you think TikTok will last before another platform arises?
That's a good one. I wouldn't have a question to that. I'm very sorry. The current cycle seems to be between 5 and 10 years for a major platform to emerge. The question would be, what is major, and have we reached the point of like a too big to fail type tipping point in platform evolution, that the Facebook universe and TikTok and Google TikTok will sort of like come alongside and start to dominate in a certain way? Does this utility behavior that I mentioned before, which that by the way shows, can this be broken up again? Because how many formats do we have left? I think the biggest breakup that we might see is currently in the Apple Epic lawsuit being discussed on day one. And I mentioned this with immersive technologies. Currently, we're very, very inefficient with this screen. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're spending our life on a small screen, using hands, ears, and eyes at the same time, and being zombies on the road. Now imagine you have these glasses on, you have immersive technology, the second screen becomes redundant. Zuckerberg already said it in the discussion with Marky Brownlee. This, I think, will spark a new platform to emerge, and this will probably make all other platforms redundant, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Markus, we are almost out of time, but I still have great questions. I think it's interesting. They're all coming from the audience. What's the business model of working with an influencer? Is there an industry standard? How do you find them? How much do you pay?
There's no industry standard. There's agencies that work as almost like promoters of influencers. I don't suggest going through these agencies because they take a cap of what you need to pay to the influencer, and of course that's how they live with. It's almost like a modern form of being a pimp. If you go on TikTok, I suggest using the TikTok Creator Marketplace because you have the best information to find an influencer and then talk to that influencer directly. I don't want to use the word, but being an influencer myself on a platform, I have started to work with brands because I wanted to have this experience as well, right? I care about money, but I don't want to be an influencer, but I've done it. What I found interesting, all the brands that approached me, nobody asks me anything. They just approach me and tell me, we want to sell this, and can you do something? We pay that much. And I say yes or no, or I say I want more or less. I find it really, really odd that brands don't engage more, try to build up relationships, try to find out if that really makes sense for them. As in, Markus, do you know about your target demographic? Does it make sense for us to work with you? Nobody asks me this. Again, this would be my approach to it. So no industry standard, in my opinion. Street smarts would be needed.
I got it. Thank you. Another question. You mentioned that span of attention is getting shorter. Do you think all ads, not just TikTok, including traditional, should shrink to smaller bits for all?
I believe so, yeah. If you best example, go on YouTube, the pre-rolls before you watch your YouTube. I have a trigger finger. I think YouTube trained me to click in a millisecond on the skip ad button when that pops up. Why? Because in the 5 seconds, no ad could ever capture me. They couldn't capture my interest, right? And TikTok teaches you within the first 1 to 3 seconds of your 15-second video to capture the audience's attention so they would watch the 15 seconds. If you watch content of TikTok, 60 seconds feels like an absolute life. It feels horribly long. Let's put it that way, right? Imagine an ad for 60 seconds. It's like, so yes, if we embrace shorter formats in a shorter time, attention span decreasing society, that's probably a winning key to be more return focused with the advertising.
Wonderful. Here's an important question. Is there any training program to learn how to do effective videos for social media? Any course, degree program that you know of?
Well, there's much stuff on the web. I thought about doing a course myself. I actually do a uni course for this. My best advice would be, I said it before, if a 13-year-old can do it, and if a 16-year-old can have 140 million followers, you don't need a training. All you need is your smartphone, which I know you have. Everybody has. You need an internet connection, start doing videos and see how people react upon the video. I've done the same. It's not rocket science. You will, within 10, 15 uploads, you will have a feel for it. Within 30 uploads, you will get a feel for creation. within 100 uploads, you will become an expert, and that's all you need. And then get an intern or somebody to help you with, and you're set. That would be my opinion.
Exactly. Thank you, Markus. This was excellent. Wonderful. We still have a lot of more questions, but I will invite you to our MOOC, and then maybe you can go there and reply to some of the questions that our viewer have. I again appreciate it. By the way, I just want to announce that Markus has also a scientific session that is which he submitted the paper. It was double-blind reviewed, and it's again TikTok, but not this particular topic. What was the topic, Markus? Would you announce it?
Yes, it's I mentioned before briefly. It's about surgery-related content on TikTok and the impact on self-perception and buying behavior of adolescents on the platform.
Which is interesting. So again, thank you so much for all of you watching. Now we are going to have another session that's coming up, and please go to the schedule, gloserv.org, and find it out. Again, thank you, Markus. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.